Good evening. First, before we say anything of healing, let us set our house in order. Let us be here within ourselves a few minutes early. As you would come to a class 10 minutes ahead, so the meditation may begin on time, so come into the inner room before you speak a word to God. Because, and let me explain the reason for that, we cannot begin the receiving of grace while the mind is still rushing, timing, planning, and bargaining. There must be order before revelation. If the thoughts are crowding at the door, if the plans are already writing tomorrow, you have left no chair for the infinite invisible to sit down. Now, here is the paradox, and I want you to hear it in quiet. The hardest work you have been doing for your healing may be the very activity postponing it. Why? Because that effort fixes your gaze upon the problem and upon the personal doer. Attention becomes a tether, tied to effect, tied to fear, tied to the human mind, and you wonder why the sky does not open. It cannot, while you are standing on the roof with a hammer in your hand, determined to pry it open yourself. Whether this is your first time with me or your 20th, the counsel is the same. For the temptation to strive returns in new costumes. Today it calls itself self-improvement. Tomorrow, positive thinking. Next week, it dresses up as techniques and therapies. Very respectable and useful perhaps in their place. But if you are using them as control, you are not praying. You are managing. All of that as management is nonsense. What makes it nonsense is not the tool. It is the intent to replace God with a plan. Now, I am going to tell you what of it. Meditation is the most important part of our work. If the meditation is well done, by which I mean if the inner rushing is halted and the self is seated, the rest of the lesson is secondary. You may discover that what you sought to learn is given to you in the silence. And if it is not given in words, it is given as peace, and that peace is the teacher. There is a difference, and mark it well, between effort that expresses faith and effort that replaces God. The first is devotion. You set your house in order, you keep your appointment, you take your seat. You open the window and wait upon the Lord. The second is management. You try to make the wind blow by waving your arms. The first removes the doer from the doorway so that grace may enter. The second blocks the threshold with good intentions. So we begin by stopping. We stop the bargaining, the timing, the rehearsing of prayers we hope will move deity. We stop diagnosing ourselves and others with the same busy mind that created the turmoil. We stop measuring progress by sensations and minutes. And we sit, not idly, but receptively, until the fever of doing cools. In that quiet, a conduct is established with the source. In that order, revelation has permission. And then, and only then, the Father within doeth the works. Now, having come to a stop, let us look plainly at what we have been living on. Most of the world lives on effects. By that I mean, we wake in the morning and take our cue from body, from history, from diagnosis, from bank account, from relationships, from moods. An effect leaning upon another effect. If the body smiles, we are hopeful. If the bank frowns, we are anxious. If a friend praises, we are up. If the news scolds, we are down. Then the mind, believing these effects are causes, tries to fix effects by moving more effects. Pills for pain, policies for fear, affirmations for worry, advice for other people's behavior, all of which are sometimes decent as tools, but when they become our reliance, we are worshiping the branch and forgetting the vine. Let me explain the reason for that. An effect can only point. It cannot supply. You cannot draw water from the reflection of a well. Trying to patch condition with condition is the human way, and it works for a little while because there is still stored sap in the cut branch. Remember the 15th chapter of John. A branch that is cut off may look alive for a season, but it is not drawing. It is living on yesterday. Strain is the sign of disconnection. The fatigue you feel is not from life. It is from dragging your own separate self through the day without the vine's flow. Now then, source living is the other way. Source living begins the moment conscious union is established, when, in silence, a conduct is made with the infinite invisible we call God. From that union, the activity of spirit appears as health, as supply, as harmony, not because you have outlined it, not because you have managed people or conditions, but because life, being life, flows. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Bread is an effect. The word is the source. In source living, you are no longer taking orders from body or balance sheet. You are taking your sufficiency from within, and the outward forms come and go obediently, like shadows following substance. Now, here is the unmasking of striving. The inner sentence, "I must make this happen or it will not happen," is the confession of separation. It is the creed of the cut branch. It says, in effect, there is no vine, there is only my effort. That belief is the bondage. That belief is why the shoulders tighten and the plans multiply and the prayers become speeches. Of course you tire. You are attempting to be your own God. So listen again, quietly. Meditation is the most important part of our work because meditation restores contact. And as contact is restored, the outer evidence changes. Not because you pushed it, but because life is flowing again. You will find that harmony arrives from where you did not plan it, supply from avenues you did not invent, and health as a piece you did not engineer. You will recognize it by this: no strain. The withering stops, the greenness returns, and you know, without boasting and without fear, the Father within me, He doeth the works. Now let us look squarely at this. Effort becomes a god when it promises you control. Let me explain the reason for that. The personal mind wants the credit. It wants a method to master, a lever to pull, a sequence to repeat, and then it wishes to announce, "I did spiritual work and obtained results." That is the subtle idol. It bows to its own technique and calls that worship. And I say to you, all of that as control is nonsense. There is no technique by which the human mind can compel God, and there is no schedule by which you can calendar grace. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Now, here is the blunt word, and I give it to you in love. Much of what is called prayer is merely fear talking to itself, and much of what is called healing work is willpower dressed in sacred language. How do you know? Because it begins with an outline and ends in strain. It tells God what must happen and when, and then it times the clock and measures the pulse and takes notes on the calendar. That is not prayer. That is management. And management, in this sense, is the mind declaring, "I am separate. I will take over." That declaration is the very wall through which grace cannot be felt. Not because grace is absent, but because the ear is filled with its own voice. Now then, there is a law here, a spiritual law, and I want you to hear it quietly. Grace is not earned by intensity. It is realized by surrender. Surrender means ceasing the mental assertion that you know what must happen and when. Surrender means releasing the outline, the threat, the bargaining chip, and consenting to the presence. Be still and know that I am God. Be still is the discipline. Know is the grace. Discipline brings you to the threshold, into silence, into receptivity, into that inner room. Strain tries to force the door open, and the more it pushes, the more it proves it does not trust the host within. Do not confuse devotion with doing. Devotion keeps the appointment, clears the desk, quiets the tongue, and waits. Strain hurries to the altar with a shopping list. Devotion is obedience to the first commandment. No other gods before me, including the God of your own conclusions. Strain is idolatry, because it worships a projected outcome and seeks to coax the universe into producing it. The moment the mind insists, it must be this, it has cut itself off from that which alone knows what is. And now the heart of the matter. You may think you want the digestion corrected, the pain relieved, the bill paid, the loneliness ended. Those are surfaces. Underneath, the ache is for God. The need is contact. Your heavenly Father knoweth ye have need of these things. The things are shadows. The substance is your union. When contact is realized, effects reorder of themselves. Without your engineering, without your strain, because the Father within doeth the works. So lay down the lever, lay down the stopwatch, lay down the outline, and let us return to the one practice that is not a project, but a consent. The quiet in which grace can be known. Now we come to prayer. And I must say to you plainly, most of what passes for prayer is not prayer at all. Let me explain the reason for that. If prayer is thought to be pleading, persuading, repeating until the infinite yields, if it is informing God of what God does not know or coaxing God to care, then you have reduced deity to a kind of celestial official who must be lobbied. All of that is nonsense. Your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. If requests could move omniscience, history would show it. There have been centuries of fervent asking, and yet wars have not ceased by asking. Depressions have not been averted by asking. And in our own homes, the quarrels and the fears have not dissolved because we multiplied words. The failure is not in God. The failure is in the model of prayer that assumes separation and seeks control. Now then, what is prayer? Prayer is not an audition in which you perform piety to win a part in God's play. Prayer is an audience with God. We go to God not to speak first, but to consent to presence. True prayer is silence before the infinite, a listening without agenda, a yielding that says, "Not my will, but thine be done." Hear the ancient posture. Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. We do not listen to get a message to hand back to the human mind for manipulation. We listen so the impulse of spirit may have conduct into expression. We are not arranging outcomes. We are establishing contact. Now this is where many stumble, because the highest prayer often looks like nothing happening. There are no fireworks, no visions to boast of, no gooseflesh to measure with a clock. Only a quieting, only a laying down of outlines, only a soft recognition. God is. And yet, right there, something is being established, a conduct with the source. As in the socket and the lamp, no display until contact. So in prayer, no holy display is required. It is enough that union is real. After that, light appears where it must, and not by your engineering. Meditation is the most important part of our work. I repeat it because it is the hinge upon which your life will swing. Communion first, demonstration follows. If that meditation is well done, if the inner auditioning ceases and an audience is truly granted, the outward adjustments will come of themselves, and you will recognize them by their effortless arrival. Those things happen from outside. Phone calls you did not arrange, reconciliations you did not script, health that appears as a deep ease rather than a human fixing. Evidence that the Father within doeth the works. So let us correct prayer in practice. When you turn within, do not bring a list. Do not tell God what God must do. Sit, become still, and consent. Father, I am here. I do not come to get, I come to be. I do not come to move thee, I come to be moved. Then listen. If there is a word, receive it. If there is only silence, receive it. Silence is not absence. It is presence without intermediary. In that hush, separation dissolves. In that hush, the branch is grafted again to the vine. And from that grafting, life flows. Communion first, demonstration follows. And always remember, with gratitude and with certainty, the Father within me, He doeth the works. Now we begin the unlearning. And the first word is simple and exact. Stop fighting the condition. Let me explain the reason for that. Every argument you hold with pain, fear, or lack bears witness that it has power, substance, and presence. Each inner protest is a little incense on the altar of the very thing you would be free of. You check it, you debate it, you lecture it, you time it, and then you wonder why it looms larger. It looms larger because you have appointed yourself its priest. You are making offerings of attention, and attention is worship. Now then, this is not denial. I am not asking you to pretend that nothing is presenting itself to sense. I am saying, refuse to wrestle. Withdraw the homage. No debates with symptoms. No diary of how many times in the hour it pinched. No dramatization to yourself or to others. Why? Because each of these keeps you on the field of battle. And the battlefield is the arena of the personal self. The personal self is the fighter. The personal self, believing itself separate from God, takes up arms. And from that premise, it can only strive. I must get rid of this. Who is this I? That is the false center. The very sentence is the confession of separation. As that center loosens, healing begins. Now, how do we loose it? Quietly. If there must be a word, let it be short, reverent, and closing. This is not my life. My life is hid with Christ in God. Then return to silence. Do not turn that line into a cudgel to beat the condition. Do not make of it a charm to force an outcome. Speak it as you would close a door gently. Click, and then be still. In that stillness, you have refused to grant the appearance a throne. In that stillness, you have obeyed the first commandment. No other gods before me, including the God of pain, the God of fear, the God of lack. Be still and know that I am God. The still is your part. The knowing is grace. Now, notice what stops when you stop fighting. The pulse-taking stops. The inner courtroom adjourns. The hourly verdicts, better, worse, maybe, if only, fall silent. In that peace, contact may be felt. Not always as a sensation, not always as words, but as a ceasing of urgency, as a sense of not having to manage. The fighter fades, and with it, the claimed authority of the condition. You will find that you can look at it without flinching and without salute. You will find the branch grafting again to the vine, life flowing, not by your struggle, but by your union. I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father within me, He doeth the works. Now be alert, because the mind is clever. Once you stop fighting, it will propose a holier campaign. Fixing. A nicer set of tools, a spiritual vocabulary, and the same old manager in charge. We will meet that in the next step. For this hour, your practice is refusal of combat and return to quiet. Withdraw the worship of attention from the appearance. Turn to the inner room and consent to presence. When you stop feeding the battle, you begin to feel the peace where God is realized. And in that realization, without your engineering, the Father within doeth the works. Now we meet the second impulse of the busy self. Fixing. Let me explain the reason for that. Once it can no longer swing a sword at the condition, it reaches for a toolkit and says, "Very well, if I cannot fight it, I will repair it. I will get the right book, the right affirmation, the right sequence, and I, doing it correctly, will put myself and this situation in order." That is spiritual pride, even when it wears a humble voice, because hidden in it is the belief, I am creator and judge of outcomes. All of that as control is nonsense. It leaves the doer on the throne, and so it leaves separation unhealed. The costume has changed, but the actor is the same. Now then, fixing does not stop with your own body or pocketbook. It marches straight into your relationships and organizes everybody's holiness. You know how that sounds within. If only my husband would be more spiritual. If only my child would listen. If only my employer would see my value. If only mother would stop complaining. And then, with great sincerity, you begin treating them, mentally adjusting, mentally correcting, mentally arranging, turning living souls into projects to be managed. That, too, is separation. You have set yourself above them with a blueprint and made of them shadows to be trimmed. Hear me gently, and hear me firmly. In true prayer, we do not address persons. We do not outline their improvement. We do not use the word you. We do not call them by name in our treatment. And we do not sit in judgment cloaked as compassion. Why? Because there are not many minds to fix. There is one mind to realize. There are not many powers to balance. There is one presence to behold. The instant you set about to fix a person, you have returned to effects living. You are tinkering with the shadow rather than abiding in the light. Turn on the light, and the shadows arrange themselves. Keep fingering the shadows, and you will call that pious work while keeping the room dark. Now, how is the light turned on? It is not by superior psychology, and it is not by holier management. It is by communion. Meditation is the most important part of our work, because in that silence we release the role of manager and resume our place as witness to God. In that inner room, we rest in the recognition. One presence, one power, one life. We do not try to make a husband kind, a child obedient, a body comfortable, a bank account full. We abide until the sense of a second presence dissolves. Out of that abiding, harmonies appear, and you will recognize them by this mark. You did not outline them, you did not time them, and you do not need to defend them. Resign, then, as fixer of yourself and others. Sign the letter and lay it on the altar. Father, I relinquish the blueprint. I will not fight. I will not fix. I consent to thy presence. And be still. If we are not to fight and not to fix, what is left? Receiving. Listening. Letting the conduct be established so that which is may flow into what appears. We are preparing now to learn receiving, not passivity, but union. And as we come to it, hold this certainty quietly. I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father within me, He doeth the works. Now we come to receiving, and let me explain the reason for this emphasis. Receiving is not passivity. Receiving is conscious union. It is the establishing of conduct with the infinite so that life may flow into expression as naturally as the vine feeds the branch. Do not look for fireworks in this. Conduct is not an emotion, and it is not a thought. Conduct is quiet, steady, invisible to the senses, but practical as the wire that carries current. You may not see the wire in the wall, but turn the switch and there is light. So it is with this inner contact. You may not feel holy, you may not think profound thoughts. An invisible order is established, and through it, the infinite invisible pours itself into form. Now, how is that established? By the same simplicity we have been practicing. Sit down, close the door, refuse to bargain, refuse to outline, refuse to measure. Be still until the rush subsides. Listen, not for words, not for signs to take back to the mind, but for the simple recognition, God is. And here is my testimony, and I give it to you only to build your confidence in the law of it. There was a season when I kept the appointment 8 times a day, short, unhurried silences, not to get, not to prove, only to consent. For months there was nothing to boast of, only a faithful returning and a little more quiet each week. Then one morning, without strain, there came that click. The chest lifted, the breath deepened. Something in the abdomen drew in, as if a belt had been fastened from within. And the burden that had always been just behind the eyes dropped. It was not an emotion, it was a surrender. The personal sense yielded enough for grace to be felt. Now, do not make the click your idol. The click is not the goal. It is a signpost at the edge of a country you were already entering by obedience. The real gift is the inner certainty that arose with it. I am not alone. I am not a branch dragging itself. I am grafted. From that hour, meditation became not a project, but a homecoming. And I tell you, meditation is the most important part of our work, because in those faithful audiences, the conduct is strengthened, and as conduct is strengthened, life flows. How then do you receive? Take your seat with no demand in it. Say within yourself, Father, here I am. Do not ask for relief. Do not time the silence. Do not test for results. Sit until the mind quiets and the heart becomes available. If thoughts pass, let them pass as birds over a field. If a word rises, acknowledge it softly and let it sink. If only silence greets you, honor silence as presence. 5 minutes or 15, the measure is not the clock. The measure is that you have ceased managing and have consented to be lived. Now watch how the river takes its own banks. Guidance arrives, and you will recognize it because you did not invent it. Supply appears from avenues you had not noticed. Health reveals itself as a deep ease that does not require you to monitor it. Harmonies spring up in relationships without your quiet speeches. Those things happen from outside, not controlled by the personal mind. Evidence that the Father within doeth the works. You did not engineer, you received. You did not demand, you consented. And in that consent, the conduct with your source became the way by which the infinite flowed into visible expression. Now we must speak of proof, and I want you to understand the reason we speak of it at all. We do not seek signs to flatter the human mind. We do not chase results as trophies. But there is a law, and when contact is made, life reorganizes itself without your engineering. What could not be forced by planning becomes natural by grace. Those things happen from outside, not as if there were an outside to God, but outside of your personal outlining, so that you may know, quietly and surely, that the Father within is doing the works. You will recognize it in simple ways first. There is the phone call you could not have arranged at the moment it arrived, and it opens a door you had been banging with your fists. There is the letter crossed in the mail, an apology you never solicited, and the relationship that was brittle bends and does not break. There is the ache you had been timing, and you notice halfway through the afternoon that you forgot to check it, and when you remember, it is not there to be checked. There is the sudden peace in a house that has known grievance, and no one can explain why voices are softer and footsteps are lighter, only that somehow the air has changed. There is the opportunity that comes through a stranger mentioning a name at a counter, and 2 weeks later you find yourself exactly where you needed to be, though you could not have drawn the map. Ask your neighbor sometime how they found their way here. Most will tell you they do not know. They were brought. Now, contrast this with manufactured outcomes. You can make many things happen by pressure. You can plead, you can flatter, you can threaten, you can arrange 5 appointments where 1 would do. And even if you get the outcome, it is nervous, it must be guarded, it asks for maintenance. You wake at night to keep it alive. That is the mark of a manufactured result. It consumes you. An orchestrated outcome carries its own continuation. It arrives with rest in it. There is a seal upon it that relieves you of vigilance. You do not have to explain it to yourself. You do not have to defend it to others. It came the way rain comes, of itself, from beyond the field's management, because the cloud was full. The skeptical mind will say, coincidence. Very well, let one be coincidence. But when you have come to stillness faithfully, when you have ceased fighting and fixing, and the pattern repeats, guidance from no outlined source, reconciliation without your speech, ease without your clock, then you are not looking at luck, you are witnessing law. By their fruits ye shall know them. A branch grafted to the vine bears and bears again, and you do not call that coincidence. You call it life. Now tie this back to your own heart. Striving trained your attention to effects, and so you lived by effects and tried to move them by other effects. Receiving turned you to source, and effects followed, in order and without strain. Meditation is the most important part of our work because it establishes conduct with the infinite. And when conduct is made, demonstration arrives from outside your planning to assure you that omnipresence is not a theory. Let the results be what they are, witnesses. Give thanks, and do not clutch at them. The proof is not of you, and so the burden is not on you. Quietly, reverently, say what must be said at the end of every true demonstration. The Father within me, He doeth the works. Now we come to the everyday of it. And let me explain the reason we must bring this down to hours and doors and chairs. Grace is not scheduled by the clock, but we are. The mind rushes, The day rushes, and unless you set a simple, repeatable rhythm, the tyranny of thought will see to it that communion is postponed until tomorrow, and tomorrow has a way of becoming never. So we make a discipline of silence, not as a project to improve ourselves, but as the one appointment we keep to step out of striving and return to conscious union. Meditation is the most important part of our work. Not long, not dramatic, faithful, brief, and quiet. Now then, set your rhythm. Morning, before the world starts talking. Midday, when the wheels are turning. Evening, when the day would like to write its report upon you. And, if you will, a few minutes before sleep. 3 or 4 appointments of 3 to 5 minutes, unhurried minutes, are more fruitful than one ambitious siege that leaves you tired and proud. Why? Because this is not earning God. This is stopping long enough for the soul to remember its source. We are not scoring points. We are consenting to presence. Keep the appointment even if the mind chatters. Keep it even if it seems empty. You are training attention to return home. What do you do in the silence? First, relax the desire to succeed. Let go your measurement. If it helps, rest the mind upon a sacred phrase. Be still, or Thy grace is sufficient, or Father, here I am. And then listen. Not listening for a particular sentence to take back to the mind as a tool. Listening as you would sit with a beloved in quiet, content that presence is present. If thoughts parade, let them move past as clouds. If the body fidgets, let it settle as a pond settles after a tossed pebble. If you find yourself grasping, return gently to the phrase, not as magic, but as a hand upon the latch of the inner room. Consent then to the hush. Now hear what not to do, and hear it kindly but firmly. Do not turn these minutes into mental treatments for specific conditions. Do not outline timelines. Do not analyze whether it is working. All of that is striving. It returns you to effects living, moving shadows with other shadows, while the light stands unreceived. You are not there to fix your digestion or quicken a check or reform a relative. You are there to be still and know. The knowing is God's. The still is yours. Let the personal manager resign for these few minutes, and the presence will make its own announcement in its own way. As a companion to practice, keep Scripture near to re-educate thought. Live with the 15th of John until the vine and the branch move from metaphor to identity. Sit sometimes with, My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, and let it correct your idea of peace as arranged circumstances. Remember, your Father knoweth what things ye have need of, and let that dissolve the begging reflex. Read a line or two before or after your silence, not as incantation, but as reminder, and then close the book and listen. Get in the habit of living with a Bible so that your mind is fed, not with opinions, but with the Word that points you back to source. And now the paradox of effort. Yes, you show up. Yes, you become quiet. Yes, you practice. That is your obedience. But the work is not forcing change. The work is consenting to presence. It is withdrawing the personal will from the control room and saying, without drama and without resignation, I can of mine own self do nothing. Then watch what follows, not because you engineered it, but because life flows where conduct is open. Tasks simplify, burdens lighten, answers appear from beyond your outlining. Transformation is the fruit of communion, not the product of self-improvement. So keep the appointments, keep the silence, and let the inner law write the day. Quietly, gratefully. As outcomes arrange themselves without your vigilance, remember the sentence that saves you from pride and from fear. The Father within me, He doeth the works. Now we gather the whole movement into one quiet act. Stop fighting, stop fixing, start receiving. Then let life show you what you could not make happen. That is one motion of the soul, not 3 projects. It is the branch ceasing its frantic scraping along the ground, accepting its graft to the vine, and then, without a plan and without a timetable, sap rises. You are not engineering fruit. You are consenting to life. And when life is consented to, it proves itself, not by your management, but by its own order. Now we answer the last fear, the last whisper of the manager. If I stop trying, nothing will happen. All of that is a confession that you believe yourself separated from the source. Hear me. What is real is already established in God. Harmony is not manufactured, it is revealed. Supply is not created by anxiety, it is disclosed by grace. Health is not forced into being, it is uncovered as the life of God made visible. You are not the creator. You are the awakener to what is. Your heavenly Father knoweth. The works are finished in their principle, and your task is not to add something to God, but to yield to God until the finished work appears as form and function where you are. Now let us make this surrender exact. Take, in this instant, whatever case you have been carrying, the body and its report, the person and their story, the account and its numbers, the future and its scenarios, and lay it upon the altar within. Do not ask, do not outline, do not bargain. Yield. Father, I relinquish this into thy presence. I do not come to move thee, I come to be moved. Not my will, but thine be done. And then be still. In that stillness, you have ceased appointing yourself as cause. You have returned to source. In that returning, demonstration is inevitable, not as your achievement, but as grace fulfilling its own law. Those things happen from outside your outlining, so that you may know, deeply and quietly, the Father within doeth the works. Now let us close simply. Today, before this day is finished, give one period to silence. Not to get a result, not to test this teaching. Give it to touch the source. 5 unhurried minutes in which you say, "Here I am," and listen. Let that be enough. Do it as obedience and as love, and watch how rest enters the day without your management. Let us go to God for an audience, not an audition. Consent to presence. And as the harmonies arise of themselves and arrange themselves without your vigilance, remember the sentence that must end every worthy treatment and every true day. The Father within me, He doeth the works.